Well, welcome back to another session of the 8th grade drawing project here on our e-learning adventures as we are trying to keep our art class going here. So when we left off yesterday, I had this much of our drawing drawn, if you're drawing what I am drawing, which is this particular image right here. And as I explained to you, and is my particular working theory, I drew in what I consider to be a rather simplistic background, since the background's important, but the subject matter is really the car. And so I'm saving the complexity for the car. So I have a working theory, and it works for most people I have instructed, that if you start with the simplest material that fills in the largest amount of space first, then what you're going to find is that you're more dedicated to the subject matter when you get to it. Plus it sharpens your skills up a bit en route to that happening. So we have pretty much, if you were drawing what I'm drawing or doing your own background, which is also fine, you should have completed all of that background work, you know, all of this, anything above the car. And I have been erasing my squares as I go along in order to be able to you know, make the drawing appear as it goes, which I think is also keeps you dedicated to the craft here that we're attempting to make. So now it's pretty much come time to start on some of the more difficult portions of this, and in this case it's going to be the automobile, of course. And there's some things I will have to go back and address, no doubt. I've noticed over here that my fence kind of runs downhill, because see this grid line, there's a shadow of that grid line, and it shows my fence running downhill. So I may either lower this portion so it looks farther away, or raise this portion over here. I don't know, I haven't decided yet, but that's a you know, tuning it up portion of all of this. Okay, so let's get to the drawing here. It's probably a good idea to start with the most basic geometric shapes, and when I was instructing you, if you were in my 6th grade class, we did shape drawing, and we broke down something as simple as a piece of fruit, a pear, into its individual shapes, and then we spent some time putting those shapes together in an organized manner so that we ended up with something that appeared to be a pear. You can do that with almost any drawing. And combining that with the grid system here that we have to back up what you think you see, well, then that's very powerful stuff. Okay, so now some of these items appear to be circular. A lot of people see this as circular, but it really is not. The outer edge of the tire is elliptical, and then you can see the front surface of the tire as well, where the tread is at. And in order to make that properly, you have to draw an ellipse that passes through the grid lines at all of these places. Now, it would be one thing if we could just put a dot in there and use a compass, but we really can't. And so I'm going to start with that item right there. And I know that just by, and I'm going to use my dotting technique, that this tire is right up against the very edge of the picture at this grid line. And if anything, it actually is almost right up against it, but not totally quite. So I'm going to kind of dot along right here, and what I'm trying to see is this curvation where it goes from the back edge of the picture to the bottom of the picture, and that all stays inside this particular. Now here's the thing, it's got kind of a flat spot on it, so we may have to account for that. Alright, so I'm just carefully visually analyzing this curvation right here, and this dotted line method really has had huge success with my other students, especially at the lower grade levels. So I'm going to just dot that line in there, and I may go back and erase all of the blocked in material I did earlier, because I think I'm going to find that pretty confusing. Now see, here's the thing. Okay, so it touches right there, but actually it disappears down here on the bottom of this. So to be honest with myself, I have to just keep analyzing where that curve happens at, and where it originates and where it terminates. And in this case, I've not got it curved harshly enough. It needs to curve, and probably not quite to halfway. So this series of making all of these adjustments is really an important part of making an accurate drawing. And a lot of what we have drawn so far is stuff that came out of your brain and was just noted down on paper, right? Now we're getting to the point where we have to draw what we see, drawing from observation. Okay, I'm going to say that is pretty close, and I'll tell you what, I could measure it to see. I could measure off from the corner of the drawing here to that tire, and it looks like it's about 3/4 of a centimeter, so it should be 1.5 centimeters right here. So from the corner of the drawing, 1.5 centimeters. That's pretty close. That's pretty close. So for right now, I'm going to leave it alone. Now here's an exercise that really works as well. We're trying to find that outside surface of where the sidewall of the tire meets the tread, and that's what we're trying to draw right now, is that sidewall, this ellipse, this egg shape. Okay, and as I'm now starting to analyze it, I can see that that egg shape actually goes out the bottom of the picture, or at least it's going to be resting right up against the very bottom of the paper. And so our task is to try to plot this ellipse or this oval so that we have a accurate representation of it. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a moment, and all of this dotted line material that I had earlier, I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean that out of the area I am working in right now, because I know for a fact it's going to confuse me. And it may be confusing to individuals who are viewing this video as well. So I'm going to try to do everybody a public service here and take care of this before it causes chaos throughout the land and confusion amongst the art students. We're trying to communicate by making art instead of confuse and confound people. So in this case, I think these have done their job, and so we can edit that material out, having done its job. And any other stray little marks that may be appearing in here would be good to get rid of those as well. Okay, now that we have a little bit more organized surface to work with here, we can continue on what we're doing here. So, looking at this ellipse, we ask ourselves, where does it come through this square at? Right here, down here in square H5. It seems to be about right in here somewhere, and so if I try to duplicate that curvation that I see right here, then that's very helpful in helping me plot it. Now for this one, I may have to split my square. So if I split the square here just to see where that piece of the tire peaks out at, meaning it reaches the top of its curve. Okay, so here it is. Now it seems to me that this curves up and it's over, and it really peaks out just before midway, and then it transits down. So it's going to follow along like this, and then just before it gets to the split line, it starts to curve down. So I'm going to have to just continuously analyze what I've made here so I can get my dots to peak out right there, meaning they hit the top and then start downward. And then this will continue on down here until it touches this portion. Okay, now I'm starting to get an idea. But this is, looking wider, if you ask me, than I have it portrayed here. So that means I need to draw this out a little bit less vertically, a little more curved out. Okay, so this is all trial and error, but it's really important to get these parts correct. And so when students in the physical classroom come to me and ask me to help them, many times it's simply because they haven't spent much time really analyzing the picture that they are attempting to draw from. And that analysis part is what is so that's what informs you to the point that you are able to reproduce what you see, because you're a careful looker at it. And so people who have good observation skills, those observation skills, now look, this cuts right across that midline. People with good observation skills, that habit really translates into a lot of other positive things in life. Okay, so I've got a bit of a point on the end of this, and it doesn't have a point. It's really quite, it's very gently curved, really. And so I'm not struggling, but I'm examining what I've got and what the drawing really looks like. So I just keep, you probably noticed, I'm just continuously widening out this ellipse, because at first my impression of it was that it was a little pointier on the ends, and now I'm starting to realize that it is not. And that's okay, because as you dot along and you investigate what you see, that's how you come to the real answer, the truth. Now, it makes some obvious sense that this should all curve down here and along the same continuous arc. So a lot of drawing is also the application of practical geometry. We all know that the sidewall of the tire is round and smooth, and where it comes to a corner, it would be where it touches the tread, not, you know, not all pointy in a lot of areas. So I think that this is starting to look like what I see in front of me. Now I have to also look at the projection screen to see. Now I'm going to try to look at these together and ask myself, is that pretty close? And the answer is, I think it's pretty close. So if I had to give it any more criticism, it would probably be that I need to just kind of widen it out. Just I've got a little bit pointy, and this line down here could also be widened out. So it's more of a rounded oval than it is like a paper clip. Okay, but I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and bold my lines and erase my crossover there, and go on to the next part of this, I think. So it's important that see, one thing compounds another thing, or one success. So one success, if you take your time, that compounds itself into subsequent successes. If what you do is you rush through something with little planning, then you will make a mistake, and that mistake will compound itself in subsequent areas of the drawing as well. So when you measure stuff off and you verify that what you are drawing is actually accurate, you don't lie to yourself too much, then you're going to make much better drawings and much better a lot of things. So you just have to be observant of how you approach problems, and think of yourself as though you were probably like watching yourself work. Okay? So if you were observing yourself working, you know, would you notice that that person is really patient and persistent and gets it done on time? Or would you say, man, that person is not doing anything meaningful with their time right now. No wonder they never finish anything. Okay, so that ability to kind of observe yourself and see yourself as others might is also an important skill. And so, you know, people are watching you a lot in the world. Okay, now, this tire has this like crescent moon shape on it, is what it appears to be. And that crescent moon, I'm going to go ahead and analyze it here, and I'm going to use my red pen, and it looks to me like it kind of, a little flat portion of it maybe And as we trace around that edge of that tire, it comes down here and meets right at the bottom of the picture. So it appears to be shaped like a crescent moon. Now, many times we've tried to do this with this particular drawing, and it doesn't quite come out looking quite right, but we're going to keep on keeping on here. So we're going to split that square. I'm going to split that square, and it shows me that everything happens before it hits that split line. Okay, so that's a good thing to know. So I'm going to split the square, split the square. Now, this is what we're trying to get here, is this portion of the tire, the tread of the tire in this case. Excuse me. I'm glad I didn't sneeze on the drawing. That was nix for a bad drawing. Okay, so it kind of looks like it goes right here. It appears to me to be almost flat and level right there to the grid line. And then it starts to curve down. Okay, so we're going to use the dotted line. There's the tiniest little corner that it clips right here. Okay, and then it crosses just barely. And then it continues on and finishes at the bottom of the picture. Now, I'm splitting the squares, but see, it still comes out looking funny to me. Because I think, personally, I think it should be more like this. It should come a little bit, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I just don't have it. It's got kind of a corner there. There we go. Okay. But will it look three-dimensional is the thing. That's the problem here. It's kind of shaped. We know it's shaped like a cat food can, a really short cylinder. But it's not looking like that right here. See, so if I trim this down a little bit, will that make it look more three-dimensional? So many times you find yourself just constantly messing with the image until you get what you want. And you know, when it's drawn in isolation, like that means we're just drawing this one object sitting alone, it's hard to know if you're making it relate to the rest of the car. So we're going to kind of come back to this, but what we're going to do is move on to other tires and get them put in the right place. If you were in my 6th grade class, when we drew the hot rods, no, they weren't really hot rods, they were just old school cars, but when we drew them, we did that together, and the first thing that we did was put in the tires. And so in this particular drawing, be a little more complicated than that one in 6th grade. Okay, so I'm going to not abandon this. I'm just going to start getting other parts of the car put in so I can continue to just build it together. Sometimes you just can't, you know, draw one perfect tire and then not get the rest of the car done. So in this case, now we're going to go over to the other tire, the one that is closest to us. And in my opinion, that the center of that tire is in square D6. So in square D, and this would be 6 right here, the center of that tire is kind of, where is it? D6 is over against about right here, and maybe a little bit up from halfway. So if I plot a dot right there, which would be the center of this tire. Now there is a tiny little bit of tread showing, but I don't think it's enough to cause this to not be able to use a compass on this. So what we got to do, if you've got a compass, otherwise you could use a pattern, otherwise you got to freehand it. So if I split my square so I can get an accurate estimate of what I'm looking at here. Okay, so that'd be D6, and that would be this square right here. So if I split that square, it shows me that pretty much that's right in the dead middle of that square. that little mini quadrant there. So I'm going to have to replot that. I'm going to put it right here in the dead middle of that little mini. Now, let's see if I can use my compass to get the right size circle. Now, I know that it can't be any lower than the bottom of the picture, so if I were to come and get the most extreme one that doesn't quite touch the bottom of the picture, and it would be this one right here. And let's see if we describe a light circle if it crosses the lines in the right place. I'm feeling pretty confident about this. Okay, now before I remove my compass, I want to really emphasize that dot. Okay. Now the question is, does it cross the lines in the right place? And it looks like it does there. And it continues to rise a bit and come down here. There's that little bit of space right in there. There's a tiny little bit of space on the bottom. And then this, you know, that's pretty close. I think I'm going to leave that alone. Yeah. And if I was really uptight about the front edge of that tire, I would place this back on the dot again. And what I would do is find, I think it was, which one of my circles is it? It must be that one right there. Let's hold it down and just see. Yep, that's the one. So what I could do is put it right up here where it just starts to show the tread, which is just about right there. And I'm going to slide it over 1 hair of an inch. Okay, then right here I'll be able to see that. Well, I'd have to go farther than that even. I'd have to go a little farther. Now let's see how it works. There we go. See, we can see the front of that tread this way if we're really motivated to do that. And but see, I don't think that that's going to be necessary, but I'm going to leave it in there anyway. Okay, so let's do a little bit of indexing here. If we were to take our ruler and look at our reference picture, it looks to me that this tire and this tire in the background, the other tire, are almost perfectly level with each other, if you ask me. So if that's the case, that means that we can. Now what's happened here is, see, this tire is smaller. The top part is level, but the bottom is not level with that. So there's something amiss here. But what we'll do is we'll just index off of the top of this tire to the top of the tire on the other side. Okay. I'm going to just draw a light line right there to help us figure that out. Now here's where it's going to get tricky. We got to find where the bottom of this is at, and it looks like it's in square B6. And in square B6, oh, this is, shut my mouth. This thing is farther away than I thought. Okay, back to the ruler, index line. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so let's once again, we're trying to find out where the top of this is, and it's in square B5. I'm going to split square B5. Help me out here. So look at square B5. It's right here. I'm going to split that square. And strangely, the split line is above the indexing line that I just showed you. And there is, it looks like a lot of space in there. Okay, so this is just a guide. It's not the solution to everything. Now, in the middle of all of this tire, and there's a lot of mechanical devices in here, but we have to kind of estimate the middle of it. It's about right there. That would be in the upper right quadrant of square B6. So I'm going to split this. I'm going to split this. Okay, that seems to be in the upper right quadrant, but it seems to be a little bit closer to this line, about right in here. Now let's see if we can use our compass to help us make that. Here's the problem. This tire has to be high enough up here to touch this indexing line, but up high enough so that it doesn't also touch the bottom of the drawing. So let's emphasize that dot, put our compass on there, or use a pattern, or freehand it. Okay, I'm going to try to find the one, I think it's this one right here, that touches the line but won't end up on the bottom of the picture. Now this one I'm scribing in lightly because it is going to be, portions of it will be erased. Okay, that actually is almost precisely as I see it, because this portion of the tire will be erased. Okay, now we'll take out our layout work. Leave the dot. We might have to use that for subsequent circle making. Okay, same here. Leave that dot. Okay, we're cleaning it up. I might go back and bold a few lines here, just to keep me visible and committed. Okay, here we go. Dust all this off. And it looks like my drawing is starting to emerge from all of this mess of lines here. And that is a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to bold some of my lines here. Not so harshly that they can't be erased, but just so that they're visible and I can see the drawing beginning to develop. Now in this case, this disappears behind the body about right here, and it disappears behind a headlight about right here. So this is all of this circle I'm interested in right now. However, this circle I'm interested in, all of it, excuse me. Okay. Now we've got something to start working with. We've got all 4 tires on the ground. There is an indication of a tire back here, but we'll get to that at another time. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start with the front of the car and work my way to the left. From the left, excuse me, to the right. Okay, this is starting to look pretty good. Now, so that means this grill right here. So the way I see it, the top of the grill is clearly in square C4. So if I go to square C4, which is right in here, it looks like it's just below. That's probably going to be somewhere about right in here is where it begins, I believe. So if I were to estimate somewhere in square C4, and it curves and then drops straight down before it leaves the square, and that, so if it curves and then it starts to leave the square right, and it drops straight down just before you get to the grid line. So just kind of lightly sketching. It goes straight down all the way until it disappears about halfway down square C6. Okay, so we're just following the grid line. And then it seems like it curves back just a little bit before it disappears behind some other body part of the car. Alright, so now here's where this is kind of, we're trying to make this kind of a strange cylinder shape right here. And the way I see it, it kind of has this little Oh, it's a double line. I mean, if you want to get, we're going to just keep drawing, but see that little white stripe right on the edge of it all. So it kind of has a bit of a three-dimensional appearance here to it. It's got this little shark fin right here, if you are observant. It's got a little marking right there, and then it curves off like this. Okay, and then this part curves up like this. Okay, now this other line, which is this one right here, looks like it's about in the halfway area here, somewhere about halfway across. So we're going to just kind of, now I'm going to go back to my dotting technique, because I can see that this hits just barely on the front of the tire. Almost on the front of the tire. Now I could measure these things too and multiply them times 2, and that would really verify my observation, you know, if I were attempting to make sure that it was totally correct. At this point, I'm just trying to get it blocked into the right spots. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and bold that line a bit. Erase any trashy markings. So you always kind of refine the line, and especially when you're observing something, you just constantly have to look at it and ask yourself, is what you are drawing and what you are seeing, are they even similar? And that's a practice in a lot of things, not just making art. Okay, now I'm going to go back to that tiny little stripe that I'm fascinated by here currently. And it goes uninterrupted all the way down to the little curve. And strangely, there's that big black broad stripe in there too. And it kind of looks like this, I think. Now, I don't want to get totally wrapped up in details right now, but you just notice these things, and then sometimes you gotta do something about it. Look how it goes straight down, and they're eventually both blocked off by a little piece of the underbody. But okay, let me dust this and see where we're at with this drawing here. Well, I gotta say, it's starting to look like an automobile. It's starting to resemble the one that we're actually drawing as well. So that's a good thing. I'm going to kind of commit to some of my lines here. Okay, I'm going to think that looks alright for now. Maybe bold this line a bit so it's visible on the projection screen. Alright, very good. So, now, let's continue on with the grill right here. This wider portion of it that gets pretty close to the line here. I'm going to just, let's see, curve it like this. I'm going to maybe have to get it slightly closer to the line than it literally shows in the reference picture, but I'm going to try to keep it as close to the original here as we can. And that disappears. Right, surface of the tire, yeah, just inside the line and line C. Okay, row C, there we go. Yeah, there's nothing as embarrassing as drawing it perfect and then finding out that you got it in the wrong square. Kind of causes problems with your drawings. Okay, that's starting to look pretty good. Now, let's go ahead and move on to something else here. So, from this corner of this grill to the windshield, which is in square E4, is pretty much a straight line. So, let's figure out where that goes. If this were here and this is square E E4 right here, I got to ask myself, where does that windshield start to happen at? And there's the dinger. We're going to figure that out here real quick, and then that's going to be enough for one session, and we're going to continue this in the next session. So of course I'm going to split my block, and square E4 would be this block. And then by looking at that, I can tell, and if I plot a dot right here where the windshield and the hood meet, that's obviously going to be about right here, I guess. And it looks like it slightly runs uphill, so I'm going to plot a dot right there. And then I'm going to get out my ruler, and I'm going to find the top of my grill and noticeably tilt it slightly uphill. If I were to put my ruler against it, you'd see it. Just slightly. Whoop, I shot too far out there past that. Okay, that's a line I'm willing to bold right there. Pretty confident with that one. Okay, so let's kind of review where we've been today. We started out simply by erasing some of the layout work from the previous session. I'm going to do that right now. Now I'm going to leave that in there because I'm still working in that square when I come back next time. Okay, and then we drew in the tire, the large rear tire back here. So I think I'm going to have to work on that. It appears to be thicker in the picture than I have it right here. Sighted in where our other two tires are at, here and here, noticing that these top two here are level, even though the bottom is tilted uphill slightly, which it is. That's good. Got the grill started also, and are working our way from the left to the right. And so it won't be long until we have a drawing of a car. In fact, I'm betting that you can already start to see it in there. You can start to see where this is all curved in there, the rear portion of the car. It's going to come into existence rather quickly in the next session. So thanks for your attention, and I'll see you in the next session. Have a good day.